Now, London councils are fighting back against London Mayor Sadiq Khan's controversial ultra-low emission zone. Bromley Council has actually started fining Transport for London vans for traffic violations, including mounting curbs in residential areas. And we've been talking about the ULEZ expansion zone for a very, very long time indeed. In fact, you might argue that the Tories managed to win the Uxbridge by-election as a result of the ULEZ expansion zone, because people in Uxbridge simply didn't want it, as most people in London don't. But I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by Minister for London, Paul Scully. Paul, great to see you. Obviously, looking around the outskirts of our city, and you represent Sutton as well, which is in kind of one of those areas, are you kind of sympathising at the moment with the way some of these councils are taking measures, like Bromley, to basically sort of try and frustrate some of these moving vans? Because one of the things that we saw happening was, as the the people started taking cameras down and vandalising them, the council, the London Mayor's office started putting vans out there to try and catch people who were driving around, and they couldn't be caught by the static cameras. So where are you on this?
Look, again, I'm not going to condone any vandalism and destruction of those cameras, because I think you can't just pick and choose the laws that you want to obey and then disrupt in that way. But I sympathise with people who are picking up fines, having to pay these charges. I've always been against the ULEZ expansion. So for Bromley and councils like that to actually give parking tickets to a van that's parked on a double yellow line, therefore causing an obstruction, I think is perfectly reasonable. But I think councils should have primacy. They are elected by their people on a mandate, and actually look after those people in a cost of living crisis and their small businesses, something the Mayor has failed to do. You talked about the election in Uxbridge. The Prime Minister yesterday described ULEZ as the ultra-low electability zone for Sadiq Khan. This is something that is on him, and he needs to pay the political price.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, one of the things you've been campaigning for as well, and I think you've written to Sadiq Khan, is asking him to remove the ULEZ camera from outside the Marsden Hospital. Because even though he would say, well, of course, if people are getting ULEZ fines outside that hospital, they'll get an exemption and they won't have to pay. You know, it's a pointless activity, isn't it? I mean, it shows you what is driving this. It's greed, isn't it?
Well, look, the good news is I got a response. The bad news is it's had nothing of any use in it. And you're absolutely right that, it was just the usual line about ULEZ, the overall line, and you can get compensation. Some payments can get, some patients can get a refund of their charge. Some, not all, clearly not families. There's one fundamental problem, because that zone, there is no sign. The sign saying you're in a ULEZ zone is smack bang next to the camera. So there's no warning at all, because they're coming in from Surrey. What the NHS refund scheme does not do, doesn't give you a refund for your fines. So if you get fined, that's on you. So with no warning, no accountability, cancer patients are going to get fined, and their families. That's just not fair.
It's not fair. It's actually worse than not fair. It's actually cruel, isn't it? I mean, because people in those situations are already under a fair amount of stress. The last thing you need is some envelope arriving through your letterbox in the morning with a fine that you have to pay. And if you don't pay it, it suddenly spirals up into some ludicrous, ridiculously high-priced fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's exactly it. I mean, look, Mike, you and I are both against this this expansion of ULEZ. I think it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's not going to do what he thinks it's going to do, or is claiming it's going to do, in terms of reducing air pollution beyond anything, beyond the 1.5% reduction that his own impact report says. But that particular camera and what's happening in Bromley, that's implementation issues. So you need to have common sense. If you're going to go against the public mood, at least have some common sense about how you approach it.
Yeah. And as far as you know, how is the actual scheme going? Because obviously we know about, the Blade Runners who are taking down these cameras. We know about people who are blocking the mobile vans from being able to take pictures and giving them, and sometimes towing them away. You know, there's an awful lot of sort of what you might call low-level resistance out there. I've also heard of people who are saying they're just not paying the fines. I mean, is Sadiq Khan being open enough about how it's going, whether it's actually working?
Look, Mike, you asked me how it's going. It's taken me a month to get a letter back about a single camera with nothing in the letter. So, frankly, I haven't got a clue. We'll be asking questions. The London Assembly Conservatives will be asking questions as well, to make sure that we can get the data, including how many fines that particular camera when it's been rebuilt, because it's been vandalised again, is actually capturing of people going to the Marsden. But this is the data we need to see exactly how it's going. But I just don't know at the moment.
Right. And I mean, we've seen Rishi Sunak this week saying that he's the friend of the motorist. He wants to be somebody who does make laws that actually protect the motorist. He said he's going to try and overturn 20-mile-an-hour zones. It then turns out he can't really do that because it's local authorities that have the permission to do that, by the way, from our democracy. I mean, is there anything that Rishi Sunak can do to help motorists in the way that he wants to? Because effectively Sadiq Khan could just turn around and tell him to get stuffed, presumably, if he says, get rid of this expanded ULEZ zone. He hasn't got the power, has he?
Well, I think there is always areas of change to legislation that you can look at. I think the best way is to change the administration, whether that's the mayor or Labour councils or Lib Dem councils to Conservative councils who will be a friend to the motorist. What we want, we want to encourage people away from the most polluting cars, but you encourage people. You do that with people, not to them. There's nothing worse than having a politician of any sort, any colour, dictating to people what they can and can't do.
Yeah, exactly right. And Paul, just one final question on what I'm calling violent Britain. The last time you and I spoke last week, we just unfortunately witnessed the death of a young woman, a 15-year-old girl, going to school, stabbed to death in Croydon. We've had another stabbing death since then, making it the 17th teenager stabbed to death in London, this time in Edmonton. I know you've urged Sadiq Khan to do something about knife crime. Why can't he do something? What's the problem?
Well, it is a complex issue, to be fair, but you've got to, so where he can do something is really lean into the Met Police, of which he's our de facto police commissioner, police and crime commissioner, to make sure that they have the powers to do stop and search so that they can find the knives in the first place, to make sure that they have the powers to, or that they are using every avenue to investigate these crimes and getting those arrests. And then it's up to the courts to do the sentencing. It's up to people in schools to actually do the education to make sure that they don't grab a knife in the first place. Whether it's the mayor, local councils and national government, we all need to do that education piece. But clearly, that's not going to help people this year. That's something that will feed in months and years to come.
Absolutely. Paul, thanks very much indeed. Good to talk to you. Paul Scully there, who is the Minister for London, of course, reporting into us from a Tory party conference. And now,